I have made hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds of pie dough in my 26 years of being in the pie business. And today I want to show you how to make a super tender, flaky pie crust by hand in your own kitchen. So give me a thumbs up if you want to learn how to make a tender, flaky pie crust. If you're not on pie duty for Thanksgiving, you may want to share this video with that person who's in charge of making pies. Now, I always start with chilled ingredients. My pastry flour is what we use at the pie shop, but if you're at home and you don't have a source for pastry flour, just use all-purpose flour. So I've got 2 cups of flour, and I've got half a cup of butter. I like to use a little bit of butter in my pie crust because of the flavor. And then the other half of the fat is this wonderful palm oil, and that's what we have been using for the last few years at the pie shop, and we have made sure that it is sustainably sourced and that they're not knocking down the rainforest to plant palm trees. So we've made sure that this company has all their certifications, just so you know. So I've got Kerrygold butter. To me, I really feel that the 100% grass-fed butter is so much more flavorful than American butter. And no offense to American cows, but it's just the way that they graze them over in Ireland. I've got my salt, and I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. Now I'm going to show you how I cut the fat in to the flour, and I use my fingers so that I can feel what's going on. And I'm just kind of rubbing everything together here. I don't want to keep my hands in here too long because of my body heat will start melting this fat. So here we go. It's only going to take a couple minutes to get this part done, and I'm using my fingers along the sides of the bowl to make sure that I'm getting all of the flour incorporated with the fat. And I want to leave some nice pea size, I guess that's what they always say is pea size, in the fat. I don't want to break the fat down into teeny tiny small pieces. So, okay. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and some people's body temperature actually runs a little hotter. So they need to either work faster or get their hands out of there sooner or use extra cold ingredients. Sometimes people will put their shortening right in the freezer. So now I'm going to add the water. And this is ice cold water. And I'm going to add the water all in at once. I'm not going to mess around with adding a little dribble at a time. And you're going to see our pie crust here is almost like oatmeal. It's very wet, and a lot of people will add a little, vinegar, or they'll add a little vodka, and there's different theories of what all that kind of stuff does, but I'm done making my pie crust here. I added all my water. It's very wet, but what's going to happen here is I'm going to allow it to rest in the refrigerator for about an hour. I'm going to kind of try to form it. And now you see I am adding a little extra flour in here, but everything is nice and neat and clean. Okay, now that is feeling very tender. I'm able to pick this up, but I don't want to keep playing with this. Okay, wonderful. This is perfect. Let's put it in the refrigerator and allow this pie dough to sit, relax, and absorb the moisture. And you might not be using it until tomorrow. Maybe you're going to use it in a couple hours. Maybe you won't use it for a couple of weeks. Maybe you're trying to do everything you can to get prepared and prepped for Thanksgiving. And you're a couple of weeks ahead. Let's put this in the freezer, right? And I'm going to cut it in half. All right, so I want to wrap some of this dough up for the freezer. I like to get a jump on Thanksgiving. So here we go. It's nice and tight. You want to put them in I always put mine in a glass Pyrex dish. Stack them up. And then when you're defrosting these, just take them out of the freezer the night before. Give them a good 24 hours to defrost in your refrigerator. And bring them out at room temperature for about an hour or two before you are ready to actually roll these dough balls out. So I'm going to unwrap that ball of dough from a few hours ago. And I want to sprinkle just enough flour on the surface, not too much, but just enough. And patty that ball of dough out into a little disc. Now I want to make sure that I've got enough flour in my rolling pin. This is a really small household rolling pin. I'm used to much bigger ones, but this is all I had here at home. And this is going to take me forever to roll this disc of dough out. But I've got a 10-inch pie tin, so I'm going to roll this out to about 11.5 inches. And this is about 8.5 ounces of dough. So if I roll this out to 13 or 14 inches, it's going to be paper thin. If I only get about 9 inches, it's not going to be thin enough. So you see I'm starting in the middle, I'm rolling outwards, coming back down, starting in the middle, rolling back out, rolling up, rolling sideways. So you can see that I've got a nice even thickness throughout the whole sheet of dough. We don't want it thick on one side and paper thin on the other side. So I've got a nice feel of about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now I'm going to take it from the 12 position. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold it in quarters again and pick it up and put it in my pie tin. All right, so I found an old pie tin from the pie shop. It's a heavy aluminum pie tin with our logo stamped in the bottom, and that's what I'm used to using. So this should fit perfectly. Now when you pick up your pie dough, place this little point here in the middle, and you're going to unfold it. And it should fit nicely. Okay. Now we don't want to play around with it, like I said, with our body heat and start melting everything, but I kind of want to just get my hands a little floury, and I want to cut the edge of this pie crust off with the edge of my hand. I'm missing a little bit here, didn't quite go out to the edge, so I'm going to use a little bit of this scrap dough here to thicken up the side. Here's another little weak spot right here, so okay. So now this is a nice, perfect pie shell, and this will be good to bake for a cream pie. It doesn't have to have a fancy edge on it. Now if you're going to use a pie shell for, say, an open face pie like a pecan pie or a pumpkin pie, you'll want to put a pretty crimp around the edge. And I can show you how to do that. So take a little of your scrap dough and just kind of give it a little pinch, any kind of design or decoration that you want. I'm going to use a little bit of this extra scrap that I cut off. I don't want the edges to get too thick. All right, there you go, a nice little pinch of a design. I've got my oven at 375 preheated, and I'm just going to score the pie shell with a fork, and I'm going to put this other pie tin inside of here just to hold everything up. Now I don't want to put too much pressure on here to smash my beautiful edge that I just worked so hard doing. But I just want it to get firmly secure. Now you can bake your pie shell in your oven like this, or you can bake it upside down. And we baked our pie crusts when we were blind baking for cream pies upside down like this for a long time. Our pie crust has so much fat in it that it would just melt. So if we're baking it without this, there's nothing to hold the sides up, and those sides might fall down during the baking process, and you're ending up just with, you know, pie crust on the bottom of your tin. So here you go, that's a trick. Sometimes I put a little weight in the bottom of this, especially if you're using a convection oven, because the fan is blowing in your oven, especially if you have it on high fan, and this might blow off. So, but better, just bake it upside down on your rack. After 8 minutes, flip it back over, give it a little push, and then take the pie shell off. Now it's a nice firm pie crust, and allow it to bake for about another 8 minutes. So a total of, you know, anywhere 14 to 16 minutes. All right, so here's our perfect tender flaky pie crust. And I want to slice this open so that you can see just how flaky it turned out. Okay, here you can really see some blisters in through here, and that's what you're going for. You can see all the layers of fat, where these were all fat particles that when they heated up in the oven and they steamed up, they held the layers of flour apart. So that's how you get your flaky, tender pie crust. So it's not crumbling in a million little crumbs, but it is flaky enough to be just perfect, where you can break it with a fork. You don't need a sledgehammer, you don't need a steak knife. This is perfect. So when you are making the pie crust, and say you're baking for someone who is vegan and you don't want to use the butter, you can use 100% palm oil or even coconut oil. It makes a really great pie crust as well. Those are both solid fats at room temperature, so they make a really nice, tender, flaky pie crust. For my daughter who's a vegan, I'm making a pie crust. I'll use Earth Balance every once in a while because it has a lot of butter flavor, I think. It's pretty good. But whatever you do, do not use Crisco or any kind of partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. We got off that many years ago. I did use it for a lot of years back in the 80s and 90s until I learned the dangers of partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. So we stay away from Crisco and all manner of PHOs. Subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, because next week I'm going to show you how to make an apple pie. And I'm going to talk about why this apple is the best apple to use for apple baking. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next week.